The last family photograph. The last photograph of John and his kids sits on a dusty shelf in a forgotten corner of his parents' home. In the picture, John's skin looks pale, his eyes sunken. His children, Emma and Lucas, cling to his sides, their smiles forced, as if they already understood more than their years should allow. The unsettling truth was that this was the last happy moment they'd share. John's troubles began when he was diagnosed with kidney disease. It was slow at first, fatigue, swelling, strange cravings, but soon, the illness took over his life. Dialysis became a routine, his world shrinking to doctor visits and hospital rooms. His wife, Sarah, tried to hold on for a while, but John knew she wasn't coping. "It's too much, John," she whispered one night, standing by the kitchen sink, her back to him. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." John begged, not for himself, but for the children. "They need you, Sarah. I need you." But her mind was already made up. By the next morning, she was gone, leaving a note on the counter and an empty space in their bed. John did his best. He learned to braid Emma's hair, pack school lunches, and cheer Lucas on at soccer games. But the disease didn't care about his efforts. It took more and more from him until even the simplest tasks became Herculean. One day, Lucas found John collapsed in the bathroom. Emma called 911 while holding her brother's hand, both children too scared to cry. John survived, but the doctors warned him that without a transplant, his days were numbered. The worst part wasn't the illness, it was the guilt. John blamed himself for Sarah leaving, for the kids missing out on a normal childhood, for being a burden. But he never let them see it. "Don't worry," he'd tell them, his voice steady even when his hands trembled. "We are going to be okay." But they weren't. Emma started showing symptoms first: fatigue, swollen ankles, and frequent headaches. John's heart sank when the doctor confirmed it: polycystic kidney disease, inherited from him. Lucas was next. By the time John's health was in freefall, his children were on the same trajectory. Dialysis became a family affair, with all three of them hooked up to machines in the same hospital room. Nurses pitied them, doctors avoided their eyes, and the small town whispered about their tragedy. Sarah never came back. The end came quietly, one after the other. Lucas passed first, his tiny body unable to fight anymore. Emma followed a month later, holding her father's hand as she slipped away. John lasted another week, his heart broken beyond repair. Now, the house is empty, the curtains drawn. Neighbors talk about the family cursed by kidneys, but rarely visit. The last photograph remains on the shelf, gathering dust, a haunting reminder of a family undone by illness and abandonment. After the funeral, the town tried to move on, as towns often do. But the house on Pine Street, the one with the peeling blue paint and the overgrown lawn, stood as a silent monument to the family who lived and died there. John's parents inherited the house. They were too old and too tired to keep it up, and every creak of the floorboards reminded them of their son and grandchildren. Still, they couldn't bring themselves to sell it. Instead, they left it as it was, a time capsule of loss. The kids' rooms remained untouched. Emma's bed still had her favorite pink quilt neatly folded at the foot. Lucas's shelves held dusty action figures and books he never got to finish. On the kitchen counter sat the sticky notes John used to leave reminders for himself: pick up meds, doctor at 3, and, heartbreakingly, tell them you love them. For a while, neighbors occasionally stopped by, leaving casseroles or flowers on the porch. But as the months turned to years, the visits stopped. People have a way of letting tragedy fade into the background, like a song you used to know the words to but now hum absent-mindedly. The town moved on, but the house didn't. Teenagers began telling stories about the cursed house. They dared each other to peek inside, swearing they saw ghosts or heard faint whispers. But the truth was quieter: more sorrowful than supernatural. The whispers weren't ghosts, they were echoes of a family trying their best to survive. The tragedy wasn't some curse but the cruel reality of illness and isolation. The haunting wasn't in the house, it was in the memories of those who knew John, Emma, and Lucas. One day, a young couple bought the house. They didn't know the full story, only that it was an old place with potential. They painted the walls, ripped out the warm carpet, and planted flowers in the yard. The laughter of their children eventually filled the air again, a sound the house hadn't known in years. But late at night, when the house was quiet, the mother swore she sometimes felt a heaviness in the air, as if the walls themselves remembered the family who came before. She never said anything to her husband, but on some nights, she would stand by the dusty shelf where the last family photograph had been left behind, staring at the pale man and the two children with sad, knowing eyes. She never moved the photograph. She didn't know why, but it felt wrong to take it down. It belonged to the house. And so life continued, as it always does, layered over the lives that came before. New memories were made, old ones quietly faded, and the house on Pine Street stood as both a beginning and an end, carrying the weight of the past while sheltering the hope of the future. As the years passed, the town all but forgot the original family that had lived in the house on Pine Street. The young couple raised their children there, filling the home with birthday parties, holiday dinners, and late-night stories by the fireplace. To the world outside, it was a picture-perfect life. But every so often, the house seemed to reveal pieces of its past, as if it refused to let go entirely. One evening, the couple's youngest child, Lily, came downstairs clutching an old, crumpled sticky note in her small hand. "Mom," she said, her wide eyes filled with curiosity, "did you leave this for me?" Her mother unfolded the note. The handwriting was shaky, worn with time, but still legible. It read, "Tell them you love them." "No, sweetheart," the mother replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Where did you find this?" Lily pointed upstairs, toward the attic, a place the family rarely went. The mother's stomach knotted. She didn't remember ever going up there since they moved in. The next morning, curiosity got the better of her. While her husband and children were out, she climbed the creaky stairs to the attic. Dust motes danced in the sunlight filtering through a cracked window. Boxes, some marked with unfamiliar names, were stacked haphazardly in one corner. She opened one box labeled John and found a collection of papers, medical bills, and family mementos. Among them was a journal. The pages were yellowed, and the ink had begun to fade, but the words were still readable. As she flipped through it, she discovered John's story written in his own hand. It wasn't just about his illness or Sarah leaving, it was about his love for his children, his guilt for passing on the disease, and his desperate hope that they might somehow live a better life than he had. One entry read, "I don't know how much longer I have, but every day I try to show them love, even when I'm too tired to stand. I hope they remember that more than the hospital visits or the machines. I hope they know I tried." The mother's eyes filled with tears. She could almost feel John's presence in the room, his unwavering love and pain etched into every word. Over the next few weeks, she quietly began piecing together the family story, asking longtime neighbors and digging through old records. She learned about John's struggles, his children's battle with the same disease, and the wife who left them behind. The weight of their tragedy lingered in her heart. She decided to share the story with her children. One evening, she gathered them in the living room and told them about the family who had lived there before, framing it as a tale of resilience and love. "They went through so much," she said, her voice soft. "But even when life was hard, they loved each other deeply. That's what I want you to remember most, love is what matters, no matter what." Her children listened intently, their usual restlessness replaced by a quiet reverence. As the mother finished her story, her eldest, a thoughtful boy named Ethan, asked, What happened to them, Mom? Why didn't anyone help? The question hit her harder than she expected. Sometimes, she began carefully, people don't always see how much someone is struggling until it's too late. That's why it's important to notice, to care, and to act. Ethan nodded slowly, but Lily, who was younger, clung to her mother's arm. Are they still here? She whispered, her voice trembling. Her mother hesitated. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she couldn't deny the strange feelings the house sometimes gave her, the whispers of the past that seemed to linger in the walls. They're not here anymore, sweetheart, she said finally, brushing Lily's hair from her face. But I think this house remembers them. And maybe we can honor them by living the way they did, by loving each other no matter what. That night, as the house settled into its usual creaks and groans, the mother sat alone in the living room, the journal on her lap. She traced the faded handwriting with her fingers, feeling an overwhelming connection to a man she'd never met. Suddenly, she felt compelled to visit the attic again. She climbed the stairs quietly, careful not to wake the children, and opened the same box she had discovered earlier. Beneath the papers and photographs, she found an old cassette tape labeled for Emma and Lucas. Her heart ached as she held it in her hands. She didn't have a cassette player, but the next morning, she bought one from a thrift shop and waited until the children were at school to play it. John's voice filled the room, weak but steady. Hi, kids, he began, his tone full of warmth despite the strain. I don't know if you'll ever get to hear this, but I wanted to leave you something, just in case. He paused, and she could hear his breathing, labored but determined. I love you both so much. I hope you never doubt that. I know life isn't fair, and I'm so sorry for everything you've had to go through because of me. But I need you to know, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. You made every hard day worth it. The mother's tears fell freely as John's words continued, raw and filled with love. I hope one day, someone will tell you about me, about us, and you remember that we tried. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. I want you to hold on to that, to each other, to love. It's the only thing that matters. The tape ended with a long silence, and then a faint goodbye. The mother sat there for a long time, clutching the cassette player, her heart heavy but full. She decided she wouldn't let John's message fade into the past. Over the years, the family made small gestures to honor John and his children. They framed the photograph they'd found and placed it on a new shelf in the living room. When they redecorated the house, they left Emma and Lucas's rooms untouched, transforming them into quiet spaces of remembrance. Ethan grew up and became a social worker, inspired by the story his mother told him that night. Lily, always imaginative, wrote a children's book about a family who lived on through the love they gave to others. And the house on Pine Street. It stood as a home, a memorial, and a reminder that love, no matter how brief, can leave an echo that lasts forever. Years passed, and the family who now lived in the house on Pine Street continued to grow. Ethan, now an adult, often came back to visit with stories about the lives he touched through his work. Lily, who had become an author, published her book about love and resilience, dedicating it quietly to J.E.L., the initials of John, Emma, and Lucas. The house became a place of warmth and community. The couple often hosted gatherings, inviting neighbors, friends, and even strangers who needed a meal or a listening ear. They called it the House of Second Chances, though they rarely explained why. One day, as Lily helped her mother clear out old boxes in the attic, she stumbled upon an envelope they hadn't seen before. It was tucked deep inside a crack in the wall, yellowed with time and addressed to whoever finds this. Curious, they opened it together. Inside was a letter written in John's familiar shaky handwriting. Asterisk, if you're reading this, it means the house has found a new family. I hope it's full of love and laughter again. I hope it's a place where dreams grow and memories are made. This house has seen its share of heartache, but I believe it can hold more than just sorrow. If you live here now, know that it's yours to fill with hope. And if you find this letter, maybe you'll do me one last favor, tell someone you love them today. Hug your kids, your parents, your friends. Remind them they matter, even if they already know. That's all I ever wanted for my family, and maybe, through you, we can carry that forward. Asterisk. Lily read the letter aloud, her voice catching as tears filled her eyes. Her mother, too, was silent for a long moment before finally speaking. He never stopped hoping, she said softly. Even at the end, he was thinking about someone else. Lily nodded, folding the letter carefully and placing it back in the envelope. We should keep this in the house, she said. It belongs here. They framed the letter and hung it in the hallway, where anyone who visited could read it. Beneath it, they added a small plaque that read, "In memory of John, Emma, and Lucas, may love always find its way home." The house on Pine Street became more than just a home, it became a beacon. Word spread about the letter, the framed photograph, and the story of the family who had lived there. People came not out of curiosity but to feel a connection to something bigger than themselves. Visitors often left notes of their own, pinned to a board the family had set up beneath John's letter. Some wrote about rekindled relationships, others about how the story inspired them to keep going through their own struggles. One day, a woman with tired eyes and a hesitant smile came to the door. She introduced herself as Sarah. She hadn't meant to stay away forever, she explained. After leaving John and the kids, guilt had consumed her, and she felt unworthy of coming back. When she heard the story of the house, something inside her broke open, and she knew she had to come. Lily and her mother invited Sarah inside. They showed her the photograph, the journal, and the letter. Sarah sat silently for a long time, tears streaming down her face. I failed them, she whispered. No, Lily's mother said gently. Life failed them. But you're here now, and maybe that's enough. Sarah began visiting the house regularly. She helped maintain the memorial spaces for John, Emma, and Lucas and became part of the family in a way she hadn't expected. Slowly, she forgave herself. Decades later, when Lily and Ethan's children told the story of the house on Pine Street, they didn't just talk about the tragedy. They talked about how love persisted, how a man's hope outlived his pain, and how even in the face of loss, a family and a house could find a way to heal. The house stood strong, not as a symbol of what was lost, but of what could still be found. And through it all, the words of John's letter remained true, may love always find its way home.